Welcome, folks. I'm Jaby Koay, joined by Achara Kirk.
Hey.
We're talking about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This is our non-spoiler review. However, we will go into some plot details, small things, just so we can talk about the movie a little bit more in depth and give you a more well-rounded understanding of our feelings about the film. So if you don't want to hear anything at all, then maybe this is not the review for you. So the very first thing I want to talk about are the fight scenes in this film, because I think that's the most standout thing that you'll notice. There's a lot of action in that regard in this movie. The one that you've seen in the trailer a lot, the bus sequence one. I was clapping halfway through that fight scene because I didn't realize that it still had more to do.
Yeah, there's more.
I was just so happy because it was the first time in a very long time that you see an actor doing it himself, and not just that, but doing a fantastic job. Because the only two people I can think of who've been doing their own thing in movies recently is Tom Cruise and Keanu Reeves, but neither of them are performing at this level. The way Simu Liu moves is just amazing. It's just like what you would get in Hong Kong cinema, and I'm like, this is what I have been craving for so long in Hollywood cinema, is that right there. I just wish there was more of them, actually. In the latter part of the movie, it's not so much that, it's more visual effects.
There was a big difference between the fight scenes that you see in the beginning of the movie, which are a lot more, I mean, I don't know how
hand to hand.
Yeah, like hand to hand and very thrilling and super martial artsy.
Exactly.
And then towards the end, because we get a little bit more of the fantasy element, then it does kind of turn into a little bit of a visual bonanza.
Yeah, visual effects bonanza, yeah. I think that they could have still integrated some cool martial arts into the latter half of the film with the visual effects bonanza. They were doing amazing stuff either way. It's just like, for me personally, given that they're front-ending it with so much of that cool martial arts stuff, and the way it comes out the gate with it too, it's like a shocker. They do such a fantastic job with setting it up, building it up, executing it, and at the end you're just like, whoa, what did I just see?
Because it starts off with a bang as well.
Yeah.
It's just like, all right, straight into the action, like almost right away. I mean, there is a little bit of character building and it's really fun and it's cute, and you get an idea of who Shang-Chi and who Katie, his best friend, played by Awkwafina, are, but then it just goes straight into that action sequence and you're like, oh, this is the movie.
Right.
Here we go.
The way they introduced Wenwu, aka Tony Leung, I thought was fantastic. They did a really, really good job of showing how powerful this guy is and how formidable he is. They did a really, really good job of developing his character in the film and making him very, very layered. And his introductory action sequence, when I say action, I mean hand-to-hand, not like anything else that you'll see in the movie, I thought it was beautiful. The one I'm thinking of at this moment is more Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And the fact that they were able to integrate it into this film is amazing. And I just wish that, again, I wish there was more of it, because they like front end you with this stuff and it's like, whoa, what am I watching? Like, it's so balletic and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
And also the storytelling aspect of action as
Exactly.
well, that we've mentioned before, because it's not just like, oh, look what I can do. It's like, no, this serves the purpose of moving the story forward. It serves the purpose of building character, and it all feels like it should be there.
That's actually a really, really good point to bring up, and one that I feel is often sorely lacking in fight scenes in America, which is you don't really have a story. It's just exchanges for 5 minutes and then it's over, and it's often marred in like crazy camera angles. And thanks to Brad Allen, rest in peace, he did a fantastic job with I'm imagining he did a lot of the choreography in this film, or at least he headed it. It was amazing. Not just the way it was choreographed, but the way it was shot. It was just amazing how you can actually see what's happening and it still feels visceral. You don't get that a lot.
Yeah, it felt really, really visceral.
Yeah.
And I feel like they really listened to the people who were in charge of action.
I don't know how much of a martial arts background Destin Daniel Cretton has, assuming he does not, because his first films were not martial arts related at all.
Yeah.
I would imagine what he did was he saw what Brad Allen brought to it and was like, okay, those are great ideas. I'm gonna go with the best ideas. You screw my ego. Like, I'm gonna go with the best ideas here.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens a lot is, and this is what I've heard from people who work in big blockbuster movies, what happens a lot is the stunt coordinator, the choreographer, the fight designer, they come up with an action sequence of some kind. They show it to the director, they show how they would shoot it, and the director's like, cool, I'm gonna do it my way now. And it's often like not anywhere near as good. And it's like, no, that's not how you should listen to them, because they came up with it. They know the best angles to really show you how this should be, viewed. I think that's an ego thing more than anything else. Like, no, it's my vision. It's like, no, like just have the best vision.
Listen to people who know better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we can move on to the acting.
I would even go as far as to say like the acting and story. Like I said, when I saw the trailer, I really wanted it to be about family. Like, I love all the action stuff, but if there isn't a strong story underneath it, then what's the point?
Sure.
Right? And I feel like this did a really great job of establishing Shang-Chi as a character in the MCU, who he is, where he's from, his backstory, his relationships. It was all done really well. And overall, I thought the acting was really, really strong, with some people who like kind of really stood out for me.
I'm going to introduce a little bit of plagiarism here against Achara, because I know that what she wants to ask the director about, but I thought they did a really, really good job of writing that line, showing authentically what Asians are like without making fun of them, because that's a fine line to walk.
In our earlier like thoughts and feelings video that we put out, there were some people asking like, yeah, but how is the representation of Asians? And I think it was really good, because it felt authentic to me, like the way that the family was portrayed. Katie, Awkwafina's character, there's a lovely scene there with her family, and I was like, oh yeah, like this is familiar. While I may not be Chinese, the way that the family was interacting, the food and the way they're talking to each other and stuff, and even with the friendships and all that, I'm like, yeah, this feels familiar to me. Every
Asian ethnicity has its own customs and foods and whatever styles, but there is a lot of overlap between different Asian cultures that you'll find. I mean, especially with the way parents treat their kids.
Yes.
There's a huge overlap there. And so in that regard, I feel like it's got a very, very wide catch in terms of relatability for Asians. And I think they did a fantastic job there of not making fun of it, not leading too hard into stereotypes, and being authentic about it. And that's also thanks to the fact that Destin Daniel Cretton is half Asian. And so I feel like he has a personal place to come from when it comes to expressing those stories.
Yeah.
It was to the point that I really wasn't even thinking about it all that much.
Exactly.
Maybe once or twice, if they mentioned them being Asian or something like that, I kind of thought about it. I thought about the fact that, there's subtitles and they're speaking, Mandarin or...
Yeah, no, and I thought that was so awesome as well. Like I picked up on that straight away, because I was like, that just adds to the authenticity of it, because as a bilingual person, when I'm hanging out in Thailand or with my Thai friends and family, we'll either just drop into Thai randomly and then back into English, or we'll just speak Thai.
Right. Even in India, they do the same thing. They call it Hinglish, between Hindi and English.
Yeah, and it's just this fluid thing where, sometimes you're speaking one language, sometimes you're speaking the other, and then they do that in the movie, and so it just feels like, oh yeah, well, that's what it would be like.
Yeah, I grew up seeing that a lot with my mom and her family, going back and forth between, their native tongue and English a lot. I noticed that in a movie a long time ago that I've referenced way too many times called Gen X Cops, and I think Daniel Wu was actually in that. This is before he became known in the States for everything he does now. They would jump back and forth between, I think, Mandarin and English a lot. So what I was trying to say is, for the most part, I wasn't thinking about it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because if it was drawing so much attention to itself that I'm thinking about it, then I'm annoyed, because now it feels like it's virtue signaling. It's going out of its way to like really be, liberal or whatever, or honor the culture. And it's like, okay, how's the story? I don't really care about that other stuff. That's like a nice layer on top of the most important thing, which is, how is your story?
Exactly. It's like, how is your story? And then everything else just is.
Yeah.
Like it just feels natural.
Yeah.
And like they really succeeded with this.
Yeah. The biggest thing in the story is a family, like you were kind of mentioning earlier, and the tumultuous relationships within there. The way that they used flashbacks in this film to tell Shang-Chi's story was very interesting, and I have mixed feelings about it only because I ended up falling in love with the flashbacks more than the present day stuff.
The flashbacks were really good.
Yeah, they were very, very well executed and super compelling, and I'm like, whoa, like I feel more for that version of Shang-Chi than the present day one. And I was listening to what other people have been saying about the film and what they like and whatnot, and Simu Liu is obviously like really, really good. He's a fantastic actor, but I was finding that halfway through the film, I didn't necessarily care about present day Shang-Chi as much as I did about flashback Shang-Chi. But what they were doing with the flashbacks was really, really showing you the tumultuous relationships with him and his father. And like, I don't want to be super specific there, but just how things got messy.
What I really liked about the Mandarin, or Wenwu, as it says here in IMDb, and we find out in the movie, he wasn't just a one-dimensional bad guy.
True.
And I think Marvel does a really great job with this. And they do it again here. And like, you understand his motivations, and it's something that we can all understand on a basic human level.
Marvel has been doing a good job with this. They haven't always. Because if you look at Doctor Strange or you look at Guardians of the Galaxy, those are pretty one-dimensional villains.
Fair enough. Okay, but like
Black Panther and Endgame.
So they did another really great job here, and then Tony Leung just like knocked it out of the ballpark with his acting.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of like, yeah, like you're a shitty father. You're not a great person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel for you.
I loved Tony Leung's choices all around, except for one thing, and those were his sandals. I just didn't like those. I thought that was a terrible choice. I don't know.
That's not even his choice, I'm sure. That's wardrobe.
Might have been him. He might have been like, I feel strongly about these sandals. As a boss, I would wear sandals. I'm just like, no, dude, don't do that. That's a bad choice. I don't know whose choice that was, but I did not like that at all. But outside of that, I thought he did a fantastic job. He did a great job, not just with the acting, but the fight scenes as well. Working with visual effects and whatnot, the way he had to. I don't know how much experience he has in that area of having to deal with like visual effects on that scale.
Right.
But he did a great job. Because, you know, they're moving these rings around and whatnot, and it feels like they're moving these rings around. Between him and Simu Liu, it genuinely feels like he's moving these things and manipulating them. How do you, like, imagine this thing as an actor? It's like theater, but way more complicated, because you also have to consider the camera, you got to consider, like, how things are clashing, and then, like, visual effects come, you know, the guy comes in and adjusts you and go, no, you know, you can't do this, you got this limitation here, don't step over the tape. You know, you have a lot of complexities that you got to consider. Like, I had to do it once for an Xbox commercial, and I'm not doing any fight scenes. I'm just moving an iPad around, basically. I'm not supposed to say iPad. It was Microsoft, but it was a Surface or something like that, right? So I know how complicated that can be, and I can't imagine how much more complicated that would be with fight scenes.
Yeah.
You know, and so he did a fantastic job there of being this very formidable person, and it's like, it makes you really, really feel that buildup and excitement for the fight between him and Shang-Chi. At least for me, a lot of that family stuff was relatable beyond the scope of it being Asian. Just like dealing with like that kind of weird relationship where like you love your dad, but it's awkward and it's like there's anger there and you're frustrated and you're trying to deal with that. I've had that weird relationship with my father, not to the degree of Shang-Chi, but you know, I found just that family stuff, the ability to explore that was very, very interesting and relatable for people who don't come from perfect white picket fences families.
And I would say, I would venture to say that that's probably most of us. You know.
Well, there you go. Shang-Chi, the most relatable movie of all time. Go ahead, Achara.
We both really enjoyed Awkwafina as Katie.
Like for me, she was the star of the show. And it's not because of like ha-has, because I'm not one for like all the jokes. You know, it's like her thing was a careful, smart integration of performance with humor, with her own, I guess, improvisation and like really being authentic to the character. I thought she did a great job all around. Like her arc was the most interesting to me, actually. She doesn't have any place to start from in terms of like this world she's dropping into.
I think it was a really great choice to include her character because she's basically us. She's kind of his best friend, and then all of a sudden she's like, wait, hold on, what? There was so much stuff like I didn't know about you, and as she's discovering it, we're discovering it, and she's growing, and so it's kind of like, oh, if we were in that situation too, maybe we would have the opportunity to kind of get involved and grow and have those experiences as well.
I guess the last person I want to comment on in terms of the acting is Michelle Yeoh. She is someone who's been a favorite of mine since I was a little kid, and it's always lovely to see her in general. So she's already starting from a positive place for me. As objectively as I can be when it comes to her, because it's hard for me to be objective when it comes to Michelle Yeoh, I thought she did a great job. I mean, in terms of her movement, in terms of her acting, just the presence she has.
Yeah, she's a great presence.
It's a very compassionate, motherly presence that she offers to Shang-Chi in this movie. And in that regard, I felt that. One of the only moments in the movie where I felt emotional was because of her.
I really love Shang-Chi's mother as well. I thought she was fantastic. But maybe it's just because, you know, she played his mother. And I'm like, oh, all the feels. But yeah, her acting was so understated and just lovely. And Simu Liu, I thought as well, did a really great job.
Yeah. You know, I was going to talk about him a little bit. I think that in general, he's a really, really good actor, and he does a really good job with the material here. And I think that my issue isn't him. It's the way that he was written, I guess, or just, I don't know. There's something there that was missing. I still have not been able to put my finger on it. I can't quite articulate it because everyone else seems to be loving Simu Liu and Shang-Chi, and I'm like, okay. Something's missing for me though, and I can't figure out why. The only way I can put it is I was more in love with Shang-Chi's flashbacks than the present day stuff, outside of like the amazing fight scenes and stuff like that.
Well, I think you made an interesting point when we were talking about it after the film, is it's almost like there's this Neo effect to him where he is just kind of like, yeah, he's figuring things out and all that, but he's not really like too much of a bombastic character. That's more Katie's role. He's just the guy who's discovering all this stuff about himself and kind of going on this inner journey and figuring it all out.
I didn't connect with present day Shang-Chi as much as I was hoping I would, is the easiest way to put it. I'm basically trying to figure it out with you guys through this discussion. It might not even be him in the writing of the character, but it might be like a plot thing, because the middle of the movie kind of slowed down a lot.
Yeah.
And I sort of lost touch with the film in that regard a little bit. In the middle of the movie, I'm like, okay, it's slowing way down from like what was set up and what I know is to come. That middle chunk just kind of like stops for a moment.
Well, yeah, because
You
there's
know?
a lot of exposition, because
Yeah.
it starts off really strong with the action, it's kinetic,
Yeah.
and then it kind of slows down a little because there's a lot that needs to be explained about
Yeah.
history and the characters and the relationships and where they're going forward. And then not only that, but it's setting up this whole other like fantasy element as well. And then it all kind of gets integrated at the end and it's like, boom, action again.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a hot second. The fantasy element, what I thought was really, really cool conceptually. I thought it was a really, really neat idea. And the visual effects in here is really stellar. It doesn't feel like they held back in terms of the visual effects. But for some odd reason, when it became a visual effects bonanza, I started to connect less with the action than what was happening in the first 2/3 of the film. There just seemed to be this disconnect that was happening for me in terms of like the combativeness. It didn't feel the same. I don't know why, like, because what they're introducing in the story, it's scary, is the easiest way to put it. It's really frightening what they're introducing. And I'm like, whoa, that is nuts. And so there's nothing wrong with the setup. It's just in terms of the execution that it was showing, I'm like, I didn't feel it though. It felt like a staging of some kind, as opposed to, oh my God, they're immersed in this battle with these things.
Right, yeah, because it's very obviously visual effects.
Right. You know, when I'm watching Avengers Endgame, I'm not thinking about the fact that Thanos is a visual effects character. Whereas I felt that here. And it got a little skadooshi. A little bit of Wonder Woman-y, if that makes any sense to any of you guys. It was fun. It was like, it's Marvel, it goes big, or go home. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. I just really wish that I got more of those fight scenes. I think that was the feeling I walked out of the theater with. I wish I got more of that stuff, because that's what I fell in love with. I didn't need it to go this big. That's the temptation with Marvel movies, is like, go big or go home. But I'm like, you don't need to though. Like, you don't need to. Like, you could have done that and not have be that epic. I cared more about the heart of the story than I did about all that other stuff, you know?
Well, I think the heart of the story is the most important part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, like, I'd say that the visual effects throughout the film was pretty stellar. Like, I'm watching it, I'm going, I can't tell when Simu Liu has a double. I can't tell when they're on a green screen most of the time.
Yeah.
I watched my brother's review, or one of them. I can't, because he's done two now. And he commented about the music. How did you feel about the music in the movie?
I really liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, yeah, I thought it was really nice.
There were interesting choices being made with the music. It felt cultural, kind of like how Black Panther felt cultural.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. I need to watch this again before I determine how I feel. Because on the one hand, I'm like, this is kind of cool. But on the other hand, I'm like, it's kind of cliche. You know, it's like, I wasn't sure how I felt because it's writing that line of like Chinese sounds or Asian sounds. But it's like, but do you need that? You know what I mean? So that's where I got a little bit, conflicted. But
then they throw in some hip hop as well.
I didn't care for that. But I'm weird because I don't like hip hop. I didn't like any of the hip hop in the movie. But there was like two major hip hop music points, and I was like, yeah, I don't need either of those. I would have been much happier without it. However, I think in the end, I'm going to feel that there were strong choices and they were good choices, because when you bring Simu Liu or Shang-Chi into other films and his music shows up, you're going to be like, oh, that's Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know it, just like you know the Black Panther sound.
The drums.
The drums, yeah. Like, you know exactly who you're listening for when you hear that sound. And Marvel has had a history of having a hard time with creating discernible musical sounds. Like, outside of the Avengers theme, like, what songs do you really know? You know what I mean?
It's true.
Here's a test for you. Which Marvel songs sound just as distinguishable as the Wonder Woman theme song?
Just Avengers, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And Black Panther.
Well, that's my point. Is that there's not a lot of songs that have that sort of sound, that quality where you're like, oh, I know that song, and I love it. Because that Wonder Woman theme song, even though the second movie was, that song is so cool. Like, I hear it, I get excited, I feel goosebumps, I know exactly what I'm thinking about. The only Marvel song that makes me feel that way is the Avengers theme song. And then after that, Black Panther, we're like, you just get excited because it's Black Panther's theme song. And I feel like you're going to experience the same thing with Shang-Chi now because of that sound, because they really leaned into the cultural sound. I guess the very, very last thing I want to comment about, which is maybe the first thing we should have talked about, is just the writing in the movie. Because you're talking about how, we're crediting Destin Daniel Cretton for like making it feel authentic and whatnot with the integration of Asian culture and whatnot and the representation and all that stuff. But, we do want to talk about the writing because that's the source material, right? Destin Daniel Cretton was one of the writers. In addition to him was Dave Callahan and Andrew Lanham. Wow, that's crazy that their names sound so similar. Based on the characters by Steve Englehart and Jim Starlin. So I think that the undertaking here was quite the challenge, because you have this character that we are most of us are largely unfamiliar with. It's a huge risk of a movie. So much so that there was some tension between the Disney CEO and Shang-Chi, or Simu Liu. I think it's a huge undertaking, and in the end, I feel like they did a really, really good job with establishing Shang-Chi, getting you to care about his family, the characters involved, and telling a very thrilling story. It's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
With someone like, we've never even heard of this dude before. And so...
Well, maybe there's a certain sense of freedom in that because not as many people know this character, and also from what I've heard, the way the comics were written, it was very stereotypical.
Yeah.
They're able to kind of take this character and revamp him and make him relevant and authentic.
Yeah, with all that in mind, yes, there is a bit of freedom there. It's still a huge undertaking because there's a lot of backstory that you have to cover. It's not like you can just jump into this modern day adventure with Shang-Chi and go from there. I wish that either the film was a little bit longer or they took out some of the exposition, because it's explaining so much to me, and I don't know in the end how much of all of that I necessarily needed in order to follow the plot and be excited and care. I think that's my only thing with regards to the writing. But in general, I thought it was well written. There was no dialogue in the movie that stood out to me as like,
weird.
I wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say that. Albeit like 30% of it was in Chinese. So, you know, the most important part is that you care. You care about what's going on in the movie. And for me, that was the biggest thing I walked away with, is I cared, you know?
Yeah.
I cared enough that I want to come back and see these characters in the next installment or however they're integrated into the MCU going forward.
I absolutely agree. I think this was a really great setup for Shang-Chi, and now I'm just like, cool, let's see how we integrate him into the MCU and the other Marvel movies.
Yeah. So overall, good job, Shang-Chi. Thumbs up. And looking forward to more Shang-Chi stuff going forward. All right, you guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And looking forward to you guys getting to watch Shang-Chi and telling us how you felt about the film. And that's it for now. I'm Jaby Koay. This is
Achara Kirk.
Peace out.